Dawn, the words of the first ever female Toastmaster, Helen Blanchard, ring true for her today. Helen said, "If you want to get out of Toastmasters all there is to get out of Toastmasters, then you will never get out of Toastmasters." Please welcome distinguished Toastmaster Dawn Frail as she presents her speech today titled Out of Many 3. Dawn Frail, out of many 3, out of many 3. 2018 was a very special year for me in my life as a Toastmaster. Because in 2018, I had been a Toastmaster for exactly half of my life. Now, over all of these years, I've been given lots of advice, I've had lots of mentors, and out of the many, many things that I've been told, I'd like to share with you today 3. The first piece of advice that I got was from the president of the very first Toastmasters Club I ever joined. Front Street Speakers, downtown Toronto, 1991. Patty Zettel was our president. She was barely 5 feet tall, if she was, and she was absolutely the poster child for the Energizer Bunny. If you had caught Patty's infectious enthusiasm, then we would say that you had been Zettelized. The advice that Patty gave me when I first joined Toastmasters, and when I shared that my goal was to become a DTM or Distinguished Toastmaster, she said to me, "Dawn, if you want to be a DTM," she says, "I have one piece of advice for you, and that is whenever any opportunities arise, always say yes." I said, "Always say yes." Well, why wouldn't I? She said, "There are going to be things, projects that are a little bit harder, little more time consuming, that you absolutely know nothing about how to do, and you're going to want to say no to those opportunities. But," she said, "I urge you to say yes, because those challenging opportunities don't come around all that often. And if you say no, it might not come around again in time for you to get your DTM when you want it." So I thought, okay, well, that's pretty sage advice, and so I took her up on it. And every time an opportunity presented itself, whether it was one of these big ones or whether it was one of these little easy ones, the words of Patty, "always say yes," just always rang true for me. So I did. The second piece of advice that I got was from a longtime mentor by the name of Ross Mackay. Now, Ross is a Toastmaster. He would go on to become an international director in the organization. And I first met Ross in 1995. Ross came to our Toastmasters Club to practice a speech that he would be delivering at the International Convention, the World Championship of Public Speaking, the epitome of contests for every Toastmaster. And at the end of the meeting, as a guest, he was invited to say a few words, and he mentioned that he was a member of an association of professional speakers. And he said, "If there is anybody in the room who would like to know more about being a professional speaker, come see me afterwards." So I did. So I went and talked to Ross and said, "Tell me about this world of professional speaking." And he said, "I'll tell you, being a professional speaker is the easiest thing to get into." He said that it's the hardest thing to stay in. To be a successful speaker, he said, here's one piece of advice that I have for you. He said, you could deliver, other people's stuff. He said, if you want to be successful and if you want to make money and a sustainable lifestyle as a professional speaker, you have to constantly be creating your own stuff. Constantly create. And I followed his advice. I created my own model for leadership. I created my own theories and some tools, and I did my own stuff. And I made a commitment to him that every time we would get together, and we would get together for lunch, every 2 or 3 months, we would have lunch. And my promise to him was, Ross, every single time we meet for lunch, I'm going to have something brand new that I've created to show to you. That was my commitment to constantly create. And there were days where I would wake up in the morning knowing I had lunch scheduled with Ross and I had not created anything. But by golly, I had figured something out by noon because I was able to bring it. And it was that commitment to myself and to him, and I didn't want to disappoint, that helped me to create all of the things I've been able to create to this point. The third piece of advice also comes from Ross. And during one of these said lunches, a few years into my professional speaking and training career, I said, you know, Ross, I'm thinking of changing focuses. I would like to be a leadership trainer. I said, but the problem is I don't have any leadership experience. And he looked at me and he said, you don't have any leadership experience? I said, no. I said, I've never, in my career, I've never really had a job where I've been the boss. I've not been, with a very, 6-month window where I had one person. I've never been the boss of anybody. And he said, He said, so aren't you the person who told me when you were in high school you did this particular project? I said, yeah. He said, well, isn't that leadership? And didn't you tell me, he said, when you were a teenager that you did, this other thing? Yeah. Well, isn't that leadership? Well, and didn't you tell me that in your early 20s you did this major thing? Well, yeah. Isn't that leadership? Well, he said, and what about Toastmasters? What about all of the things you've done in Toastmasters? I said, yeah, but that doesn't count. Why doesn't it count? He asked me. I said, well, it doesn't count because it's all volunteers. It's not like I'm not being paid to be a leader. And he said to me that day, he said, I would say that it requires a greater degree of skill in leadership to lead volunteers because you're not holding over anybody the power of a paycheck. That takes real leadership skill. So I had to admit to him, okay, maybe I do have some leadership experience. And then he said to me one thing that made a huge difference. He said, if you want to do a career, training, speaking, whatever, in leadership, he said, you have to believe that you are a leader. He said, no, you're not hearing me, are you? I said, well, I hear the words, well, but nothing sort of, hit me over the head. He said, you need to believe in you. If you believe you can do it, you can. But to achieve it, you have to believe it. And I would say that piece of advice, believing in myself and believing that I was in fact a leader and had something worthwhile to talk about and to share, really made a huge difference. So ladies and gentlemen, of all of the years I've been in Toastmasters, the three major gifts that I received, I now offer to you to do with what you want in your life. So if you want to be successful, if you want to live a happy life, then always say yes. Never let an opportunity go by. If you truly want to achieve what it is that is meaningful for you, then you've got to believe that you can achieve it. And if you truly want to be successful and let your passions come through, you've got to create out of your own heart, out of your own mind. So ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with these three things. Always say yes. Constantly create.